From CRI Simple Numbers, this is Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers Podcast, a podcast for those who champion market growth and anchor the nation's economy, small businesses, and entrepreneurs.
Hey there, welcome to the Simple Numbers Profitability Playbook Podcast, and I'm glad I got that right this time. It's Greg Crabtree, Brandon Gray, I'm Mike Maxon. Glad to be here with you all again, and we're going to talk some pricing strategy. But first, let's all give a shout out and a big roll tide to the Alabama Crimson Tide basketball team getting to the Final Four. You know, hey, we're more than just a football school, so it was good to see it happen. All right, Greg, kick us off. Pricing strategy. Got a lot to talk about here. We got inflation, we got supply chain, we got labor, we got different types of businesses and how they might price. Start us off.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those times where we actually are probably in a time frame where you're actually seeing inflation and deflation at the same time, which is a really bizarre concept that you don't see really often. And what causes that is, think of it like this. In our most recent Simple Numbers 100 company model, we saw 33% of our clients are down year over year. And you got 67% of our clients are up year over year in that model. And the ones that are up are companies that are able to reprice as their cost input, increases. And so typically, as labor continues to increase, OpEx is basically increasing generally at the same rate that labor is, because last time I checked, labor is in everything that you do. And so therefore, it's a reason why you'll see this. We hope inflation is coming down. It's headed towards the target. And then the next article that you see in the Wall Street Journal is, inflation's proving to be pretty stubborn. It's not coming down like they thought. Well, it's because labor continues to go up, and we have no excess labor in sight unless there's some massive gains in AI that actually eliminates positions. And it's not there yet. It's certainly helping people do some different things, but we're still in that position where inflation is going. And so essentially, think of pricing strategy and split it between two groups. There's a pricing strategy to stay relevant to the market dealing with inflation. So that's one step, but that's not actually the main thing about pricing strategy. Am I pricing to the market value? And the number one thing that I teach in the entrepreneur classes that I do when I talk about pricing strategy is, pricing bias is the number one error in pricing strategy. That you have a method of pricing to where I calculate all my cost, add overhead, plus a profit. That's the price. Well, no, it's not. There is this, what I call the price elasticity curve, where, at the top of the market is Nordstrom with the highest prices, the least amount of customers. At the bottom of the curve is the lowest price, but greatest amount of customers in Walmart. You probably don't want to be either one of them, at the end of the day. You want to be in that elbow of the curve where I have enough customers for the value part of the marketplace. But yet I still somewhat limit myself in terms of availability of growth and market share, at that point. And so what we really want people to do is say, what is the price that your most preferred customer is willing to pay? Because every customer is willing to pay a different price, along that curve. And who is that customer that I want? And if I'm constantly leaving money on the table by pricing it, that way, and as there's also other indicators. I mean, if you're putting in bids for projects and you're winning every bid, you're not charging enough. That's a pretty simple outcome. But the idea is some markets are harder to get what a market price is than others, in that process. But really, I think the idea of what is the market value for your service, and then you make the cost fit. Because if I come into a situation where there's a market value for what I do and I can't make the cost fit, that is typically the crucible of innovation, and where you've got to immediately look at how do I innovate to eliminate those costs, do it faster, do it better, do it cheaper, do it differently with less labor, typically, one of those. Otherwise, I have to exit. If I can't do it profitably, and then I can't be in existence. And there's two main groups right now that we see that are struggling with this. Number one is retail. If you're a retail physical location, you are struggling to be profitable because one, you've had a lot of your easy sales that you relied on being sucked away by internet online purchases. And so that you just can't get that back. And so therefore you've seen people shrink population of employees in the building. Well, that lowers the service value of that event. It lowers having product on shelves. If you've walked into a drugstore lately, pick any of the chains that are out there. I mean, you got a 30,000 square foot building with probably 2 employees, trying to stock the shelves and check people out and leaving, stuff stocked in the aisles that you hadn't gotten to yet. And Lord knows you don't want to be the person who has to go get a case unlocked to be able to get something, out of the building. And that because they're turning down the cost that they can control, which is labor, but there gets to be a point you can't go any lower. The second group is restaurants. You're seeing this massive difference as the restaurants that carry the experience, the ambiance, the thing that draws people, in, they can get away with adjusting their prices relative to their cost input. But if you're an ordinary restaurant, you're struggling because your labor cost is going through the roof. Your food costs are probably going up as well. Other general operating costs are definitely going up. And as you push your prices on the menu, you do it with fear and trepidation, knowing there's a point that people will. I mean, how many people that are listening to this have gone to a restaurant recently, got your bill, looked at it, said, "Well, that was good, or it was okay, but it wasn't worth that." And you start to change, where you're going to go. And I fully expect 20 to 30% of the restaurants or the eating establishments to probably shrink, to go out of business. They'll definitely turn over. Restaurants are those. It's fairly easy to pop one up where one's already been. It's a low capital requirement unless you have massive build out, and so they'll pop up, come and go. But that community is really going to struggle because they're struggling to push through price increases that match the quality of the fare that they're providing. And I think you're going to see that across many of the businesses in the present that are those discretionary businesses that their costs are going up, but there's no way for them to drop their price in that process. But yet the first move that they will make when they get desperate is to drop their price in that process.
So you mentioned pricing bias there, Greg. So reminded me of a few examples that we see with clients and some things that they say. So I'll kind of kick off a few, and Mike and Greg, feel free to jump in and kind of discuss experiences you've had with these. And so one of them is, well, they'll never pay that much. So you see that a lot of times, especially in professional services, to where folks are kind of going, well, it can't be worth that. Well, is it? What data do you have? Is that just a feeling to tell you it's not worth that? Have you looked at what they're paying for similar types of services? Have you looked at the value that you're bringing to the table? I know Greg has told a story of value that was delivered in 20 minutes that was millions of dollars. Well, it's probably worth it from that standpoint. And so that's one that we many times see from that standpoint. The other one is, well, I used to charge this. I mean, once again, completely irrelevant given the current marketplace and the pace of inflation. Another one that I sometimes hear is, well, we always increase prices by X amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
once again,
and we do it once a year.
Really, once a year. That's it.
I don't think your costs are changing once a year.
No, that like every other day. So another pricing bias excuse that I sometimes hear is, well, if we change prices, no one's going to buy. They're all going to leave. So, I've seen cases where folks have subscriptions to something, whether that's software or services or something, and they're like, well, if we increase the price, everybody's just going to leave. Okay. Do you truly believe in the value that is there? Have you been able to demonstrate that from that standpoint? And so, those are all things that I sometimes hear from other folks as excuses, perhaps, as to why they don't want to increase prices.
Well, and I think part of it too is also a change in terms of a pricing strategy of how you deliver your product or service. And so, we do a lot of work in the IT MSP space. And if you look back 25 years ago, most of them were what we call a break fix model. Something broke, you needed something fixed, you called them, they billed you time and materials, for whatever it was. And then the industry started saying, we can do that, but why don't we just charge you $80 a person per computer in your office, and then we'll sell you software and originally they did hosting and those things. They realized pretty quickly it was better to just outsource hosting to AWS and those kind of places, and they've totally transformed an industry to become a project-oriented billing business to a pay up front and on a fixed price recurring revenue basis. And I think you've seen some other industries, try to change. A lot of our marketing clients have gone to more of a defined running service level of support, try to make those on a fixed monthly billing. The digital agencies have a little better tendency to charge you a fixed monthly fee and defined scope of services. And so when I look at the pricing hierarchy of things, first and foremost, if you can charge a market price on a fixed price, that's the highest profit potential that you can make as long as two things are present. Number one, I can scope what I'm doing correctly. And number two, I can manage to the scope. And if I ever change scope, somebody who is closest to the project immediately raises their hand, pauses the work, and reprices. That works. But if you don't scope it correctly, you can't manage to the scope, then pricing on a fixed price basis will kill you. And similar to that, there's a lot of, kind of the worst one is cost plus. I mean, Jack Welch famously said, back in the 90s, he got GE out of all cost plus contracts. He said, why would I want to limit myself to 6% profit? I mean, dumbest idea ever. And so GE changed where they did only fixed price contracts. Now, there is a time that you do cost plus, and some of the current government contractors have basically turned down projects that were kind of questionable in scope, that you couldn't control scope. There were more research and development, new weapon systems, and those kind of things. And they said, no, we will only do those on a cost plus basis because you just don't know. But most of the rest of them are either fixed price for repetitive things that they can scope or time and materials. Time and materials, though, there's some techniques that you can kind of tweak, and the error in a time and materials, this is a slight derivation of hourly billing. Yes, I'm billing for my time, but there's a value rate for the skill set being delivered, but I have a variable cost rate of who can deliver that. And so the idea is I make the greatest amount of profit when I bill for $150 an hour for a technician, but I got one technician that cost me $50 an hour and another technician that cost me $75. Well, now in my way of thinking, I should charge more for the technician that cost me $75, but a lot of times the industry will allow you to do that. And so the goal is typically you really want to make sure that you fill up the schedule of the lowest cost technician first, because that's the one I make the greatest margin on. And then try to find other ways to get that extra benefit, from that more experienced technician. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, if you bill hourly, there's only two possible outcomes. I either gave away my expertise or I charge for my ignorance, because hour is not a unit of value. It's a unit of cost. And, and granted, I mean, people resort to hourly billing when there's no other method that they can come up with, or they're too lazy or incapable of doing scoping, of a project billing, in that process, And so I think those are common errors, that people make, in those types of service units. And if you can, we did something innovative with all of our simple numbers consulting. I mean, we bill on a fixed price basis because we have figured out a repeatable process for the vast majority of the things we do in our consulting team that we can give you a quote and we'll live with it. It is what it is. And, it works. But there again, we put in the effort to repeat it, prove it, refine it, but also understand what is the value of that service relative to somebody else performing a similar. It's, in the services world, it's hard to get one-to-one, but you can get close, and you at least have to have some semblance of comparability.
Yeah, I was just going to hop in. And I've joked on this on previous podcasts, but the pricing and scoping has been my baby here for a long time, and so I've had to live with the ups and downs of that world. But I was going to add to what Greg was saying from the standpoint of defining repeatable process, and a lot of the people that I see struggling with pricing fails to look at not only the defined repeatable process, but what is sort of the common plays that are happening with that client in that process. And I'll give you an example. So Brandon's going to do a financial session with one of our clients, and we know that the financial model needs updated or built, and then we're going to schedule the calls with Brandon. Well, this a long time ago, we all of a sudden decided like, hey, we were running into some issues on the financial session. So what do? We now added in a pre-call with our clients that now happened before the session. It happened, but it was sort of ad hoc here and there. Now it's a defined piece of that needed to be added in to sort of reduce some of the inefficiencies in that piece. And so that pricing had to be accounted for. And so when you begin to look at your projects or however you bill your clients, look and see saying, hey, what are the ones that have won? What are the ones that have lost? And the ones that have lost, where do we go wrong in that process? For us, it was sometimes missing some of those questions and things that then put us behind on sessions or needed an extra call. So make sure that when you do that, you are looking at going, hey, if I lined up 5 of my best projects, 5 of my worst ones, what went right, one went wrong, find it, build it in, and then price accordingly for it.
So we've talked about, kind of the market is the driver, right? I think we all agree upon that. So we've got to make sure we know where the market is. We've got to price accordingly. You have to evaluate your business model in terms of, okay, is the market receptive of me being able to pass along the increases I'm seeing, whether that's in production or in providing of a service? If the market is not receptive of that, then you got to look at your business model, because there's definite change needed. As Greg mentioned, the further you go up the chain into the kind of the discretionary environment right now, the more difficult it is to get market acceptance there from that standpoint. The other thing that Greg was kind of mentioning there in terms of the different types of pricing structure, whether that's fixed price, whether that's a cost plus, whether that's a time and materials type of arrangement, all those, with advantages and disadvantages. One of the things that used to be a really prized possession was a multi-year contract. So I think the game's changed on those as well. I'll give you one example. I had a client in 2019 sold a 5-year contract, fixed price, and they were so excited because it was the biggest contract in company history. They pop open the champagne bottle and celebrate. Well, by about middle of 2022, every time they worked on that contract, they were essentially writing a check to do so. So talk a little bit about kind of given the current environment, what do you do if you're faced with an opportunity or possibly the burden of a multi-year contract?
You got to build in and out. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. You got to build it. I mean, you got to build in the ability. Yeah, you got to build in and out. And I mean, whether that is the ability to increase prices, the ability to pass on increases in materials. I mean, we saw that happen during COVID, right? Supply chain got, backed up. Next thing you know, material prices are through the roof, and you locked yourself in on your contract. So that's the easiest answer. I'll let Greg. He's gonna be a lot more elaborate than me. But the idea is, I'm me as who does contracts here. I'm building in and out. So.
Well, I mean, I think to the extent that, and I think that's the rub right now is, obviously the buyer is trying to lock you in regardless, and the seller is trying to say, hey, I need some conditional outs because history has shown us in the last 5 years, things can come out of nowhere that I can't control, and how you work that into the agreement, is variable as the day is long, but you got to consider it. If you don't ask, you're not going to get it. And you can't just wait until that, crazy event that you can't even decide what it is. There's got to be some type of readjustment. But as a general rule, I will tell you, I mean, if you can avoid making more than a 1-year commitment, you're probably on the better side of things, because I don't see cost dropping anytime soon. So therefore, for you to do a multi-year contract that commits to a cost structure that you don't control, that's a pretty brassy bet, in that regard. I mean, I think, there's other techniques. I mean, definitely don't try to tie it to the consumer price index or CPI, as they call it. I mean, that is such a grossly flawed measure. I have seen somebody, put a feature in there of 2 times CPI, and that's still probably even underreported.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
In that process. So once again, I mean, just understand the landmines, that you're setting for yourself, if you get, roped into, looking at a multi-year agreement that you can't renegotiate. And a lot of times what you end up doing is, taking a long-term contract and breaking it into pieces, that might go to somebody else if you want to back out, from those kind of things. But also here's a couple of other things that I'll use. One of our clients in construction, I'll use them as an example of really a dynamic pricing environment. So as they have moved upscale in larger construction contracts, what they found is pricing has been relatively consistent between the competitors. So nobody is breaking rank and getting desperate to drop the price, that forces everybody to respond to. What they found, though, was in the smaller jobs that are 2 men in a truck, and you don't have a high list of requirements, but it's 100,000 or less, kind of contract. Those, they said, they just don't even think about bidding those, because it's just, the prices that are being thrown out are just really, really cheap. And so the other thing that we looked at in their business was looking as a pricing strategy of we've won our fair share of the larger contracts. So then we started looking at what we call tuck-in work. And so the idea is you want to be the person that has the ability to find an emergency that is not price sensitive, and they are time sensitive because they need it now. And this is something that goes with pricing strategy in a sense of, if you want it tomorrow, it's this price. If you want it the next day, it's this price. If you want it next week, it's this price. If you want it in 3 weeks or next month, it's this price. And understand, it's not a singular price. There has to be, a premium charge for fast response. And the market will pay for that, in a lot of cases. And so
I think a lot of the strategy, Greg, wouldn't you agree though? A lot of the strategy, as much as about is pricing strategy, it is about controlling though the scope and the work that's done. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, there are people that are just egregiously low, but I think a lot of times it's just about the overall control of the job or of the project or of the contract that really gets people in trouble, that doesn't allow for, and I'll give you an example. So we'll have projects, and this, where they're like, Brandon, we did one on a comp plan, like, hey, this is what it's going to cost. But guess what? After this moment, I got to bill you hourly because we're kind of up in the air. Up to 5 hours, we'll let you know if we're there, but we're sort of up in the air because we don't know. And I think a lot of people though, and even from what you're talking is, yeah, we might have to raise, but then it's controlling the pricing from that moment. Hey, you want it quicker? Well, to get control, I got to let you know we got a price higher.
And so those are things that if you do have fixed price contracts, that, like I said, those are the triggers of, okay, it's now into change order, type process.
Right.
But I think from it, there's an art to scheduling though for maximum pricing. So a technique that, of all things we learned from the dentist industry, one of the things that makes dentists some of the highest economic performance professionals is that they learned a long time ago a scheduling technique that they do not 100% schedule all of their patients, or at least the most profitable ones don't. They always leave at least one high value opening in the morning, one high value appointment in the afternoon, and release it 24 to 48 hours before that day. the reason for that, you're going through your routine cleaning and they determine, oh, I need a root canal, I need a crown, there's a potential for significant cosmetic dentistry, to fix an issue that they know that you really need help with. Hey, I've got an opening at 2:00 this afternoon. You want to come back, stay here and let's go ahead and knock that out. If they had scheduled a routine, filled it up with a filling, fillings, if they discover a filling that's needed, that's 2 to 3 months out at the next opening, because it's not critical. It's not, nothing bad's going to happen, by waiting. And I think the error that we make is when we try to 100% schedule everything in the system and then don't look for shift opportunities to pull high value work into the present, because this really flows into kind of one of our core principles of work to your highest value all the time. And so I always need to be able to pull high value work forward. I still need to stay on schedule to the lower value work, but I leave gaps that leave myself some maneuvering room, or I can respond to a highly sensitive and typically should be highly more profitable, project or customer activity that, when it comes up. Because this was always my complaint, about accountants is, you call and ask them a business question in the middle of tax season and say, hey, can I get back to you after April 15th? Mm-hmm. They're trying to sell their business and it's March the 1st. April 15th ain't going to work. And so, so part of that is solving it by don't have tax people, trying to do consulting, which is, one of the first things you do, but there again, that's really where, are you working on the most valuable, highly necessary thing? And that affects pricing, as well.
Good deal. Well, there you have it. A handful of things. I think if there's any action items to take, like we said, assess the market, assess the market, assess the market. Be careful with the multi-year things. Prove your value. It's a different environment than what we've been in any other time. And so don't just, have the pricing bias mindset that we mentioned earlier, and stay nimble. You might have to change prices much more frequently now than you ever have. I don't think that's going away, at least until we see this labor shortage go away.
And it's okay to be told no. Like, every once in a while when you put it out there, someone says, no, it's all right. You win some, you lose some. But I think a lot of people, especially business owners, get nervous about, oh my gosh, I was told no and I lost that one. It's like, well, if you priced it right, if you stuck to your gross margin targets and what you needed to make off it and all that good stuff, and you got told no, then so be it. But I promise you that if you stick to your targets and how you're pricing it properly, you will win in the end a lot better than you'll lose. So don't be afraid. Awesome. Well, that's it for us. For Greg, Brandon, I'm Mike. You all have a great rest of your week.
If you want to know more about driving sustainable profitability for your business, or are interested in learning more about CRI Simple Numbers, please visit our website at simplenumberscri.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers Podcast. You can subscribe to Profitability Playbook on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. If you liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. The views expressed on Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers Podcast, are those of the presenter and moderator and do not necessarily reflect the views of CRI Simple Numbers or the CRI family of companies. This podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional advice received directly. Consult with your CRI Simple Numbers advisor or another trusted professional if you have questions about your specific situation.